This is the first in a series of drawing exercises. This one is the horse in profile, and it's a simpler figure, and we'll go from there into more complicated figures, but this gives us a foundation to work from. Start out with a simple quadrilateral figure that represents the head, and an intersecting triangular figure for the throat and neck region. I want to do something a little different with this than is normally done in drawings. I'm going to provide some of the skeletal detail as well. So we'll actually start out by drawing the skeleton of the horse's head, or the skull, because a number of the prominences in the skeleton find their way through to the finished drawing. So we start out with that massive jaw. It extends down to the muzzle. Position the eye socket. Brought down the top of the head, and that nasal portion is cantilevered above the upper part of the skull. Putting in the incisors now, and adding the wolf teeth. The horse has these vestigial teeth called wolf teeth or canines. The good news is a horse is not a meat eater, so he doesn't really need those, and not every horse has those. Behind that there's a gap, and behind that we have the 6 molars, upper and lower, that are most important for processing feed. Detailing some of that jaw and up around the eye socket area now. Bringing the skull back and around, and we'll include the first 2 vertebrae. These are referred to as the atlas and the axis. The atlas permits the horse to nod its head up and down, and the axis permits the horse to rotate or pivot its head. There's a bony extension in front of the eye that you see coming in now, and I'm highlighting the areas that will be prominent in the final drawing. Alright, at this point I'm going to lose the skull, keep some of those prominences, and make way for the drawing proper. I'm reintroducing those features that will find their way through to the finished drawing. Mostly that bony ridge that runs below the eye socket. And of course that massive jaw. The jaw takes up about a half of what we could call the horse's face. Extending that forward, and it drops down into his chin. The eye socket, or the eye, actually rests on top of that bony mass in the jaw. It's about centered in the jaw itself, and about a quarter of the way down the face of the horse. Get some of that eye detail in now. Horse has the largest eye of any animal on the continent. The eye is about 2 inches in diameter. And of course the horse is a prey animal, so peripheral vision or side vision is critical to him. He can see about 350 degrees, all the way to his backside and all the way forward. He's got about a 4-foot blind spot in front, which is the reason you see a horse move its head around when it's trying to see you as you approach head on. And that's where its focal point is. For us, people, the focal point is about 1 foot out. For the horse, their focal point is about 4 feet out. So that's the reason you don't make rapid or sudden motions in front of a horse, because it creates a jumping sensation. Alright, I've shadowed a little bit of that bony mass, and I'm putting in 2 of the major muscles here, the zygomaticus and the buccinator, which also show up prominently in the finished figure. Moving on to the ears now. The ears are nice because they essentially are 3 very refined S shapes. The ears don't sit directly on top of the horse's head. They're embedded in the mass of the skull and are surrounded by a fair amount of musculature as well. The inner flap of the ear folds into the outer. You can't really see it in this drawing. We'll see it in later. Very elegant feature, though. Bringing down the throat latch area and shadowing that. And I'll be highlighting at that upper juncture on the throat, on a number of horses, very prominent is the carotid artery, and that shows up as a surface feature as well, and we'll be introducing that in this critter. Getting some of the fleshy upper lid of the eye in and shadowing that depression in the skull, which is called the salt cellar above the eye. And shadowing in front of the eye as well. There's going to be a darker shadowing in front of the eye and around the muzzle area on the horse because the hair of the horse is thinned there, and you see more of the darker flesh of the animal coming through. Finessing the ears a little bit here. Those ears can pivot about 180 degrees as well. And along with the eyes are critical senses that this character needs to keep from being some other animal's lunch. Like I say, they are prey animals. Highlighting where that carotid shows up, extending behind the mass of the jaw. Adding the nostrils now. Very supple area. There's no bone structure in there. And it can be very expressive. A bit of horse trivia. The horse cannot breathe through its mouth. So those nostrils are critical. You'll see, or you probably have seen drawings or paintings where a horse will have its whole face submerged in water, mouth and nose halfway in. And that doesn't happen unless you're dealing with an animal that's trying to blow bubbles. Added the second ear now. Those nostrils can be viewed as a backwards 6. I tend to think of them as a very mangled T that highlights the little flappy piece that is at the upper end of the nostril, going into the large cavity that is the nostril itself. Obviously, as the horse gets excited and he's either sniffing or running, those nostrils will flare significantly. and open up. Another bit of trivia, they are now making a Breathe Right nasal strip for racehorses so that the critters can pump more air through their nostrils on the racetrack. Kind of turbocharging. Starting to highlight the pole region that we talked about earlier. And that shows up as a crease right below the neckline. Starting to highlight where the large muscle mass of the neck shows up. And I'll be doing some coloring here to represent the shadowing that would naturally occur below the neck. What you've got at this point is essentially the face of the horse. Everything else is going to be just finessing and providing surface detail. Some shading to show some of the contour around that jaw and where highlights would occur. And we'll provide some color or value to the face here to contrast the highlights that will come out in a minute. Shadowing below the nostrils. A little bit of shadowing above the eye. Finessing the muscles of the face there a little bit. And extending down in the neck area. Get some value in there, and then we'll back up and add some highlights as well. Once again, it's a back and forth process of laying some graphite down and then taking it back up. At least that's my technique on this particular figure. And once again, using the eraser to create highlights above the eye that bony mass in front of the eye and behind the eye. Down the neck and the poll region again. Highlighting that carotid. This will be a little overstated, and I'll turn around and go back and blend it in a little bit. Capture those nostrils. The next in the series of these drawings will be the horse head in a 3/4 profile. So we're going to cant the head a little bit, give you a whole different aspect there. And it's a little freer in the sense that, well, the proportions on this profile are very well defined, but as the horse begins to turn and you wind up with 3/4 and then full facial, different things come into play. Issues of foreshortening and the distortion that comes from taking these masses and turning them slightly. But once again, this gives us a foundation. It gives us the basics of what we know is there, and now it's a matter of how do you represent it as you cant it in a particular direction. Once again, back and forth, worrying the highlights and the details. We'll finish this character up in a couple of minutes. Add forelock and a little bit of mane just to give him some interest. Another little bit of surface detail that adds authenticity to a representational figure are these veins that come up out of the muscles of the jaw and are prominent on the nose. And if you wanted to get real serious, we could add warts and whiskers. But for representational purposes, capturing those veins is worthwhile. A little bit of the surface detail that makes the horse such an interesting figure. And that's pretty much it. If I can convince myself to get my hand out of the way, we can give it a look at. And once again, next time out, we'll give a look at the head from a slightly different perspective.